Good afternoon and welcome to the second in our satellite series for Sicon Distribution. If we just look on the journey of the umbrella on the Sicon website, as I'm sure many of you have already seen, and if you are joining me for the multiple times that we've been doing these, you'll understand what this journey of the umbrella is. If you're new to it, ultimately, this is our way of displaying our ecosystem of modules that complement Sage 200. In this journey, you'll find a whole section on Sicon Distribution, and there are 9 different modules which are available within that particular package. The reason why we split out Sicon Distribution in the first place was to be able to give our customers the opportunity to select the modules which are appropriate to their business. It's called Sicon Distribution because it lends itself very nicely to those organizations which are buying product in to be able to sell on. But in many cases, there is a reason why you would use some of these modules in all sorts of other verticals. Container management is one of them. So if you're a manufacturer, if you're a distributor, it has the same premise for you. If you are bringing in product from abroad in some cases, on a container in some cases, or even on a shipment, then what container management is going to allow us to be able to do is to track that movement, to be able to manage that full cycle of that shipment, of that container, from creation through to arrival, to be able to then goods receive it, and it will automatically therefore update each purchase order, and to be able to manage those tracking statuses along the way. Going to pop ourselves directly into Sage, and we're going to talk about number 1, what product would potentially go on a container. So the first place that we're going to go is in our stock list, and we're going to look at our Sicon standard umbrella, and in here you are able to define for both container management and our landed cost solution, which sits as part of our hop management solution. In here in the Sicon tab and inside of distribution, you can define the length, width, height, and then for calculated volume and weight of that item. So I've defined those, and that's the information that my system's going to be working on. So when I do raise a purchase order for this, it will be able to say, oh, you're ordering 150 of those. That's 150 of these times by this. Therefore, it's this volume. And coupled with the information that we know about the products that might go on our container, we can also define what the container looks like. Like I say, just because it's called container management doesn't mean to say that's the only type of vessel that you can track or shipment that you can track. So when you go into the container size maintenance in here, you'll see that I've actually got some vehicles set up. So containers specifically. So there's my 20-foot container, which has a maximum volume of 1,000 square meters and a maximum payload of 500 kilograms. So because we know the dimensions and the weight and the volume of our stock items, it means that we're going to be able to calculate whether or not we've gone over that container maximum levels. You'll also notice in here, however, that it isn't just containers. I've got another profile for my UPS vehicle standard. So even if it's going from Exeter to Glasgow and we want to be able to track it through its progress, that's your opportunity to be able to fill up a vehicle. It might even be your own vehicle that you're filling up. Okay, so once we know what our container size is and we know what our stock item sizes are, we're then going to be able to see our container management list. This for me is a pre-configured list of containers which already exist. So if we look at container number 43, you'll see that I've created a new container. It gives it an identity of container number 43. I enter in an actual container number, and in here, we're going to be able to effectively add purchase order lines, not just purchase orders at top level, but purchase order lines to this container, enabling me to be able to do 2 things, fundamentally 2 things, lots more to be fair. But number 1, to be able to track the progress of that container. So when you set up the profiles, this is what we call a tracking profile, you might have one or many profiles that that particular shipment or container can follow. When you set that up as a standard and you apply it to your container, it will then calculate for you, based on the profiles that you've set, what the number of days are in between each stages. So these can be called whatever you want them to be called. You could have up to 8 of them per shipment. And ultimately it means that I can say, if my delivery date is X, then it will work backwards and forwards to understand what the stages are, and therefore what dates they need to reach those stages in order for me to be able to be on track. If it doesn't reach that stage at that point, so the provisional date for this one was the 20th of November, as you can see, and then 10 days elapse before it gets to the next stage. 6 days after that, 3 days after that, 1 day after that. Many of our customers will be using these tracking profiles to monitor things like the arrival at the UK port. And again, many of our customers will also be looking at this type of information to understand when they take ownership of it. So for a lot of customers, they will actually be liable for the cost at the point at which it reaches a particular stage in the shipment. So what we're also going to enable you to do is to say whether or not, number one, they have been confirmed as stages, but if they haven't been confirmed as stages, whether or not there's any problems to report, any notes that we need to add, to go in and say whether or not each stage has been confirmed, and when we do confirm it, what the actual date that it reached that stage is. If the actual date that it reaches that stage exceeds where it was supposed to be, it will then recalculate the next stage for us to then be able to monitor its progress all the way along. Fundamentally, what we're also going to be able to achieve at the end of this is to say, if those dates change, then each of the purchase order lines, which is on that container, will have a new delivery date updated to the purchase order line, so that we don't have to go back in and look at each and every purchase order to go in and change the dates. The system, our container management system, will do that for you. In addition to actually being able to track the profile, or track the progress, I should say, of my shipment, I can also go in here and delete any container lines and add any new container lines. In this particular arena, what we're currently looking at now is the container management module sitting inside of my Sage 200 menu. However, this functionality is also available in the standard Sage purchase order processing screens. So if at the point at which I put a purchase order on, it then says, it will give me the option to either add that purchase order line to a container from within the standard Sage screens, or to create a new container based on the container sizes that you've already pre-configured. So all of those things, again, more than possible. Our ones today, as you can see, also has this ability down here to have a history of what's gone on in this container. So you can see when the container was created, what was added to it, on what date and who by. And that will give you that level of detail. What we've also got at the top of the screen is more management of my shipment. So this shipment has a number of attachments attached to it. So this could be your documentation that you're capturing throughout that process, maybe some memos. We can also have additional analysis codes in here for a tracking and reporting process, ultimately meaning that, so as you can see, I've got some examples set up here of, it's a refrigerated vessel, it's a hazardous load, maybe even things like what the country of origin is. Again, allowing me to be able to enter in multiple analysis codes to be able to see exactly what's going on with my shipment. And these can be made mandatory if you need to. We can also enter in information about any deposits which might have been paid, and then integration to some of the other modules that we can provide for you, one of which is our CRM solution. And as you can see in here, there is a task management solution as part of our CRM, which enables me to be able to create a task, to assign to an individual, to speak to a supplier or a customer about this particular shipment. So that, as you can see, is a task related to our container. If you go back onto the journey of the umbrella, the very first stop off point in our journey of the umbrella was CRM. So if it's of interest to you, please do have a look at it. I think it's a very, very powerful solution for CRM task management inside of standard Sage. There's also a web front end for it as well. So back to our container. This particular container, as you can see, has 2 lines on it, 15 on here, 27 on here, two different purchase orders. I could go in and I could add a container line, and I can choose my supplier, and I can say, right, is there anything else from D'Souza, who is my supplier, on here that I would like to add to it? And as you can see, these are my outstanding purchase orders. When it displays them in red for you, it's basically going, they're already on a container. So any other purchase orders from D'Souza that are outstanding would then be displayed in this list, and I can choose which ones to add to the container. So we don't have to do it at the point at which we create the container. We don't have to do it at the point at which we create the purchase order. We can subsequently go back in and look at all of the outstanding purchase orders for a particular supplier and potentially add them to container later on. We can also do it down by stock item as well. So again, it's going away and it's looking at the standard Sage screens for my purchase orders. So we're just going to come out of this screen and we're going to go and have a quick look at how this looks in standard Sage as far as my purchase order is concerned, because I've promised you that there's information in here and that's where we want to go to. So we're just going to close out of that screen and we're going to go into my purchase order list, and you'll see that we do indeed have my two separate purchase orders which are sitting up the top here. And I'm just going to put myself in here just so that you can see how it currently looks. Because if I want to look back at this purchase order, I could go in here and I could have set a default container at header level. However, on this particular one, if we go in and edit the item, you'll see that it does have a new field that says this is the container. As I promised, it isn't just about saying what container do I want to add it to. It's also about saying I want to create a new container. So right from this screen, I can create a new container based on the profiles that we've set up in container management, and then add other lines to it later on. Now I've come back into purchase order processing via the standard Sage purchase order list screen. However, I'm going to show you another way of being able to navigate to the purchase order list in just a second, because actually we'll display more information about our containers on our purchase order line list inside of the actual module. And it sits over here, our pop order line list. However, in the standard Sage screens, as you'll see, because there is already a container on here, I then have the opportunity to go in and look at that container history. So when it was added as a container, when the delivery date was changed, who it was changed by, what the change date was. And in here, in my container tracking, remember our profile against that container is also visible directly from the purchase order. And of course, if I'm the one managing it, and if I'm the one getting an update, I can then update that tracking information from here, confirm any lines that we need to, report any problems, add any notes. If we were to report a problem, the screen that it gives me is the opportunity for me to put in the problem description, whether or not it's been resolved or not, and what the resolve date is. Again, full tracking information all the way through. I'm just going to pop myself out of this screen. We're just going to cancel out of here, because what I also want you to see is that one of the other things that we can also switch on when container management is purchased is the ability for you to actually have purchase order tracking switched on. So these tracking dates which appear up here are not those of the container which has a pre-configured tracking profile. If you're not going to use container management, if you're not going to track the whole shipment, if there's not multiple lines within there, then the other option is to create your own tracking against that particular purchase order, not a container, just the purchase order itself. Again, you can use various different tracking profiles. You can use and define the vessel name and the forwarder. You can establish whether or not the documents have already been sent to the forwarder. That kind of stuff is all key information that you might want to store. But this is at purchase order level, not at container level. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because inside of Container Manager, there is also the ability for you to be able to do something called a tracking inquiry. And it will do both things for you. So it'll allow you to see the purchase order tracking and the container tracking. And remember, container tracking is a one-to-many relationship. It's my tracking of my container, which therefore is the tracking of all of the purchase order lines, which is on that container. We're going to come out of here. Also worth noting at this point, I mentioned our pre-allocations utility. For those of you that aren't aware of it, it is the ability for you to be able to effectively reserve goods which are in transit. It is particularly relevant for our container management module. Effectively means, as I'm sure you're all aware, In Standard Sage, you cannot reserve stock that you don't have. You can't allocate stock that you don't have. It's a reason why many customers, many of those people that are using Standard Sage will take themselves into negative stock, because they want to be able to say, I've got it, because they need to be able to use it, but they don't physically have it as yet. And in reality, we don't want that to happen. What we actually want to be able to do is to say there's 20 of those coming in on a container, and then be able to use our pre-allocation utility to say when they do arrive, they are allocated and reserved for our customer. And again, that can be a one-to-many relationship. It could be one-to-one, could be one-to-many. So single purchase order coming in, reserved to multiple sales orders, or one sales order that needs to be satisfied from multiple purchase orders. So again, it's another one of those satellite series webinars that we'll do for you to explain that in a bit more detail. But again, very relevant when you are using containers. So we're just going to pop ourselves out of the purchase order itself. And then we're going to pop ourselves back into the container management module, just so you can see exactly what I'm referring to in terms of that tracking inquiry. Because now one single place for us to be able to look at the purchase order tracking. So I can choose my vessel from here, choose the stage that it's at, and it will show me the purchase orders which are at that stage on that vessel. Likewise, if we go into the containers, of course, I can choose my container, container number 43, where both of the purchase orders for my Sicon standard umbrellas are sitting. And again, choose our tracking stage, and it'll pop it in and tell you exactly what is there for you. And of course, it'll give you the opportunity to be able to go in and view the purchase orders if you need to. It will also enable you to go in and be able to go in and update it all from a single screen. One other thing, in the amend container in here, you'll have the ability to be able to see where you've got any exceptions. So where the delivery date may be exceeded, you'll get a little warning. The requested delivery date will not be met on this container. So it's your warning section. Likewise, if you've got any containers which have gone over the maximum specified weight or volume, it will show you where you have an issue, and again give you the opportunity to be able to go in and amend the container and make any amendments to it that you need to. The combination of all of those weights and volumes are visible up here, as you can see. And the very quick way of being able to see whether or not you've exceeded that is that we will actually display that for you in red if it's gone over weight or over volume. So again, lots of management sitting behind what we do in container management. So having created our purchase orders, and again, if we look at another one of the modules that sits as part of distribution, we have a solution called material planning. Material planning is a way of being able to request the system to suggest to you what you should purchase and when, based on your demand and based on what you've got and what's coming in. However, by using that suggestion as to what you should purchase, you could then raise all of the purchase orders that you need to. All of the purchase orders are then displayed, create a new container, and do it all in one fell swoop. Again, we'll cover it as part of the webinar when we get to material planning by itself for distribution. Once we've got it, once we've managed it, once we've tracked it throughout its process, then of course, the next thing, if I've got 150 product lines on that particular container, I also want the ability to be able to say, right, the container's arrived, therefore all of my purchase order lines have arrived. So rather than going into each individual purchase order, rather than having to go in and update my purchase orders individually, I can go in and do that en masse via the container management solution. So in here, in the pop order line list, which is the one that I promised you that we would look at, you can see not just purchase orders, but all of those purchase order lines that appear. So every purchase order line is detailed out for me. I would then be able to see whether or not it has been created and whether or not it's been linked to a container. And inside of the maintenance section of container management, so we're just going to pop ourselves into maintenance and then into my pop order status maintenance. You can see in here, I can define and color code accordingly. So what has been created, linked, confirmed, or where a problem has actually occurred. Therefore, in this list, I can get a very quick and easy overview of all of my containers at purchase order line level and whether or not there are problems, whether or not it's been confirmed, and indeed whether or not it exists on a container already. So if I'm looking to fill up a container, this is the best list to look at all the red ones which have been created, which haven't yet been linked to a container. If you're heavy into container management or shipment management, then this is the list view for you. Again, we're just going to pop ourselves out of here and we're just going to pop back in to receive the containers now. So this is the kind of the last bit really in container management, but it's a really clever little utility for you. So if I go into receive containers, but actually I'm just going to go back to my container management list. So it's a standard list form in the same way as you get inside of Sage. So I can add more columns into here should I wish to. I can delete the columns, I can move them around. I can create filters for my container management list. I can see everything that's new, everything that's been completed, everything that's been received, and everything that's been part received. Ultimately, it means that I have, again, another management tool to manage the containers throughout our business. And from this list, I could simply go in here and say, yeah, I'd like to receive the container. So I highlight the one that I'm looking to receive the container. There's also a utility down here, as you can see in the menu, to receive the containers, and that will load all of my containers for me and then allow me to receive the ones that I need to. In this form, you can mark it as being a part received, and you can mark it as being complete, and you can also say whether or not you want to be able to record the invoice at the same time as goods receiving. Again, one utility to do multiple things. The reason why this one is important is because the way in which container management acts will differ depending on whether or not you say it's received or part received. If I'd ordered 10 on my purchase order line and I receive 5 and I say it's a part received, it will leave that container line open for me to receive more against that line on the container. If I don't say it's part received and I just say it's been received, then the container management solution will automatically create a new purchase order line for you to then be able to potentially add it to an alternative shipment or container. So again, it does some really clever things in the background. By marking it as complete, you're effectively closing that container down and saying no more tracking information can be added, no more purchase order lines can be added. Because partway, and again, it does happen, partway through a shipment, we may have a container that's picking up in multiple ports. Therefore, adding additional lines throughout the shipment is, of course, more than possible until it has indeed been completed. We're not going to use this utility to do our goods receiving. We're just literally going to pop ourselves in here and receive our container. So obviously we're just looking at our individual one. So it's done the filtering for me. And I say, yep, that's the one that I want to receive. This is the date that I'm receiving it. This is our GRN number. And all of the lines which are here are going to be received. I could, of course, change the quantities on each line if I really needed to. But I'm literally just taking everything and saying that's exactly what's happened. These lines have been received and we receive in the container. If you are a user or a potential user of our barcoding and warehousing solution, there is also a utility that will enable you to do exactly this in barcoding and warehousing. I've only got 2 lines on here as an example today, but in reality, you might have 150, 250, 750 purchase order lines, which means that when the container arrives, the guys in barcoding and warehousing can simply take that container and receive it all in one fell swoop. There's also functionality for you to be able to take pictures of the manifest or the goods receipt note so that it will then attach itself to each of the purchase order goods receipts that it then receives in via Container Manager. Again, as you can see, lots of different touch points to the other modules that we can provide for you, but they're not prerequisites. Obviously, to make a complete solution, you may well consider them, but again, we can give you some more advice about how that sits in your business moving forward. Just to complete our one today, I'm just going to receive my container. It says, are you sure you want to receive the selected containers? I'll say yes to that. It'll go away and do exactly that and update the screen accordingly, and therefore update each of the purchase orders accordingly. And then, of course, if I'd marked that particular container as complete, then the status over here would automatically go to complete. There is a setting that sits in the background of container management, which actually allows you to automatically complete a container on final goods receipt. But for me, I've made that a manual choice to say that is now a complete container. Nothing else can be added. It is now done. Just going to pop you back into my purchase order list just one more time, just so that you can see that the purchase orders are indeed automatically updated with that level of information. So if we look at that purchase order line now, which was on our container, we see it in here as having been received. Again, from a tracking perspective, if I go backwards and look at my container, so I go back to our container management list one more time, and we pop ourselves back in to look at it. Throughout this process, you'll also be able to see each individual line item, the quantity that was on order, the quantity that has now been received, and therefore what the outstanding quantity is on that individual line. Volume and weight per line can also be displayed, and you'll also be able to go in, because this one is still open, remember, it's received but not yet closed. I can go in and add more container lines should I wish to. However, mine is done, and therefore once all received, this little button down here becomes available to me, so I can go in and complete my container. It says, are you sure you would like to complete the container? And the answer is, of course, yes. And having done that, again, you'll be able to see it all time and date stamped into the history. And in addition to that, we also have a lovely little dashboard for container management that will give you a nice, quick and easy overview of exactly what's going on with your containers. Graphically, I can instantly see where I've got late containers because they'll show me in red. And this particular panel here as a dashboard is containers which are expected this month. This one is the containers completed this month. As you can see, I've got one in here. And this little section down here is expected containers this week. So from a planning perspective, this utility enables me to be able to say, I need to make room for the containers which are about to arrive, because that's what's going to happen. You can add to these dashboards if you really needed to. You can amend these dashboards. Our product owner, Chris, has spoken to many customers around their requirements in this area. But if we've got the data there and you can extract it from the SQL tables, there's no reason why you can't potentially put it into a dashboard. But in reality, it's just a one-stop shop for everything container management wise. Container management isn't just about containers. It is also about shipments, managing the progress and tracking the progress of them. Multiple purchase order lines and the ability for you to be able to update each purchase order line with correct tracking information which you are managing, and the ability for you to be able to, in one fell swoop, receive everything in singularly or en masse using our container management receive container, and go right through to invoicing and completing that container's journey. Managing all of the documentation along the way and any communications, and giving us the ability to be able to look back at those containers to look at performance as well.
I might have missed it, but one thing that is quite powerful is that if you're adding less of the quantity to a container than is on the PO, it prompts you to split that PO into another line. If you've got 100 on the PO and you're only putting 10 into that container, it will create a second line on that PO.
Perfect. That is a really good point, actually, Chris. So in the same way as what I mentioned earlier on about not necessarily creating a new purchase order line because I've only received 5, then actually that can be done at the point of purchase order entry. So if we put on a line for 100 and we say only 50 are on the container, then it will create a new purchase order line for the extra 50. So they might potentially go on a separate shipment, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got sites that are putting a large PO on from their supplier, and then they're almost calling it off into the container as it's made.